I'm Dwayne Crum, the director of the American Institute for Teen AIDS Prevention. The videotape on this reel is designed to be used in the classroom. It's designed for use in a classroom setting, especially one in which there is time following the showing of the tape for discussion. That's why, in addition to the tape, we've also produced a teacher's guide for AIDS education. It contains background facts on AIDS education, philosophy of AIDS education. It contains discussion questions that can be used in a discussion time. It also contains sample test questions that can be used for a test or a quiz to make sure that the students have the information. Please remember, AIDS education is designed, has to have as its goal, not just communication of facts, but motivation to adopt a lifestyle which will protect the students from becoming infected with AIDS. In addition to the teacher's guide and the video, we have also produced a brochure called Don't Let AIDS Catch You. All have the same title. The purpose of the brochure is that it's a take-home piece. It's something that you can give each student to take home, read the same basic information presented in a slightly different way. We want to invite you to write for the teacher's guide and the brochure. The address is Teen AIDS, P.O. Box 10852, Fort Worth, Texas. The zip code is 76114. Or if you'd like to call for ordering information or to order with a Visa or MasterCard, the telephone number is area code 817-237-0230. We hope that this videotape can be effective in slowing the spread of AIDS in the students with whom you work. Thank you.
They say to fight AIDS with facts, not fear. Well, it's a fact that condoms prevent AIDS, isn't it? Safe sex. Yeah, that's what it's called. If you use a condom, you can have sex and not worry, right?
Recently, I was in a high school when a little girl came running up to me, tears in her eyes. She said, "Oh, Mr. Reaver, thank you for coming to my school." I said, "Well, sweetheart, that's an awfully emotional thank you." She said, "But you don't understand. You're the first reason I've had hope." I said, "You're 16, you have hope." She said, "No, sir, I have AIDS." It shocked me, and I realized at that point how devastating this was really beginning to be. AIDS is like playing with a loaded gun, and you never know when it's going to go off.
AIDS is a frightening thing to talk about, and it's okay. It's normal to be afraid of death, to be afraid of something like AIDS. But it doesn't mean that you have to spend the rest of your life in constant fear. Hi. I'm Dwayne Crum, the director of the American Institute for Teen AIDS Prevention, and with me is Dave Reaver. Dave was severely wounded in Vietnam, and since then has been spending most of his life traveling around the United States speaking to high school assemblies. We're glad that Dave's with us today to talk about a really important subject.
We have good news for you. You don't have to get AIDS. You and your friends can enjoy a normal, fun-filled life.
There are only very few things that you would have to avoid in order to keep from putting yourself at high risk of getting AIDS. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk about AIDS, what it is, how it's spread, how to avoid getting it. We've gone around and talked to kids on high school campuses around the country, and we're going to show you some of what they know about AIDS. Some of it's right, some of it's wrong. What we're here for is to correct some of those misconceptions, to let you know what the truth is about AIDS so that you can keep AIDS from catching you.
We will also talk to some doctors who have some straight answers about AIDS. So listen up, because during this video you're going to have an opportunity to deal with those questions in your own mind and learn what you can do to protect yourself and your friends against this terrible disease.
AIDS can happen to you.
How much do you know about AIDS?
They don't tell us enough around here at all.
The less I know is better. I don't want to know that much about AIDS.
I'd like to know a lot more than I do because, like, it's part of everyday life now, and a lot of people are dying. And if I got it, I'd want somebody to, like, be able to find a cure for it so that I wouldn't die.
Ignorance of this disease can kill you.
So let's start with the basics. What is AIDS? What causes it, and what does it do to the body? Can you answer those questions?
What I know about AIDS, I don't know, they kill people.
Huh?
AIDS, they kill people.
It's pretty scary, I guess.
AIDS, it's scary, I'm afraid of it, and it should be stopped.
AIDS itself is a very new disease that is entering our society. Nobody really knows exactly when AIDS began. We do know that it's associated with a devastating end result. And when we talk about disease itself, most of us are familiar with measles or chicken pox or mumps that we can get so sick from as children. But with AIDS being a new disease, we're only now seeing the end results of this terrible disease that is now being more and more prevalent in our own society.
The word AIDS, can you give us a definition for what that really means?
Okay, AIDS is a little abbreviation for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And that's a big fancy word for meaning that your ability to fight infection has been markedly reduced. And AIDS itself is caused by a specific type of virus, and we're now finding that that virus is not only a single type virus, but is now being found in several different types.
Over 90% of the people who are infected with AIDS have no idea of that fact. They lead normal lives. They have no clue to the fact that the deadly disease is in their blood. This is because it takes so long for this virus to result in symptoms. In fact, in many cases, it will take up to 10 years for symptoms to develop.
Will everyone who gets infected get AIDS?
The only thing that we don't know right now is what percentage of the individuals who are exposed to the virus will ultimately convert to the disease.
The most recent studies suggest that 3/4 of those who are infected will have the disease within 7 years. Researchers suspect that eventually everybody who's infected will die of AIDS.
We feel that everybody that has been infected by the virus stays infected. It's just a question of time of how many of those will ultimately develop the actual disease.
Is there any particular kind of people or specific age group or community that is more susceptible to AIDS?
Many people think that it's only those people that are in, quote, high-risk groups that get AIDS.
Prostitutes, homosexuals, that sort of people.
I guess you could get it from homosexuals, that's about it.
Like, I guess gay people and people that have too many friends.
Homosexuals. I don't know, just, I guess that's it.
Like people, like drug users that use the needle more than once or stuff like that, and like people that get the contaminated blood. And I guess homosexuals are sexually active people that they can have sexual intercourse with a person that's an AIDS carrier and get it.
Gay people. Just that. That's all I know.
Okay, so you're not homosexual. Do you need to be concerned about getting it?
No. No, not at all.
You're not a bit concerned?
No.
Either people who are homosexual or people that are hemophiliacs that get blood transplants and stuff like that that have been affected by the disease from someone else, or heroin addicts, I guess, that, you know, just aren't safe in the way they use hypodermic needles and stuff like that.
Anybody is in danger of becoming infected with AIDS. Unfortunately, everybody that's healthy has an idea that this isn't going to happen to me. And there are a lot of individuals in this world who are now victims of AIDS who said, no, not me. But now it's, yes, it's me.
Well, it's fair to say that any teenager who is sexually active is at risk for getting infected with the AIDS virus. Any teenager who uses illicit drugs, especially injectable drugs, is at risk for catching the AIDS virus. It's very simple. Sexual activity and drug use spread AIDS. And anyone involved in sexual activity outside of a outside of a marriage, outside of a very safe relationship, and anyone who shoots up drugs in the United States today runs a risk of getting the AIDS virus.
Including teens?
Including teenagers, that's right.
So then it seems that every one of us have to be concerned about becoming infected with the AIDS virus. That brings up another serious question. If you did receive or get the AIDS virus, how would you know? What signs, what symptoms would there be, and how can you know if someone else has it or not?
I know that they get pretty bad off. Their face starts looking real drawn out and stuff. Like when you see like say people that have AIDS, like in pictures, they look really pretty bad.
There could be kids on campus that have AIDS, but they don't know about it because it doesn't show until 10 years from now.
The people you're going to catch the AIDS virus from are the people who aren't sick, or the people that you have sex with or that you shoot up drugs with. That's your big risk right there. So don't try to pick them out of the crowd. You can't do that. I can't do that. You might be able to do that with a blood test, but even that's not a sure thing.
So you see, the most important thing to understand about symptoms is that there are no symptoms for a long time. This means that somebody that you might be with, maybe a potential sexual partner, might be infected and you wouldn't know it.
So then how long does it take for the symptoms to develop?
The current feeling is that you have to be aware of that person's sexual activity for the previous 10 years.
That's why, as I said before, it's estimated that as many as 90% of those who are infected with this virus have no reason to suspect that they're infected. Again,
individuals who have exposure to the AIDS virus, since it is a virus that may not show up for several years, may be carriers of that virus for an extremely long period of time before they ever get sick with the virus. That's one of the biggest fears that we have as in our specialty of medicine with the study of our ability to fight infections. So we don't know the true number of individuals who have already been infected with the virus and don't know it because they've never been tested.
I've seen some interviews on TV with people who had AIDS, and I know that the symptoms are not visible, so it might lead some to believe that the disease isn't really all that bad.
It's a horrible condition. It's very difficult to describe because the individuals who die from AIDS just gradually, if you want to use the term, disappear before your very eyes. We know that individuals are very healthy appearing, and then when they get the virus, you can almost see them lose their fat off their body as their immune system loses its ability to fight infection. They don't take care of the foods that they normally take into their body, and so they don't produce the muscles and the fat that we normally need, and we just see them waste away as if they're a victim of either the starvation periods that you've seen on the little children and the adults in Ethiopia, just whittle away to nothing, and then eventually what actually a person dies from with AIDS is an infection, usually from a bacteria or a virus that you or I would have no problems with.
To really get a first-hand view of what this disease does to people, I'd like to share with you an interview that I did recently with a man and his wife whose son died of AIDS.
Most everyone that's viewing has seen pictures of the Holocaust.
Oh, yes. Devastating. I mean, just absolute, it's that sunken face.
The sunken face, the sunken eyes, the loose skin, the bony hands, the elbows, the bony knees with no flesh remaining, only skin. A son that weighed normally 145 pounds, weighing 98 pounds.
Oh, my.
Just absolutely laying there in weakness, unable to turn over unassisted. Must have assistance to turn over in bed. Had to have a certain amount of help feeding himself.
You've had some very personal experience with AIDS. Would you tell us about that?
Well, my cousin passed away this summer on June the 5th, and he was 30 years old, and I stayed with him right to the very end, up until 5 days before he died. And he and I were very close. It was a very hard thing to witness as a nutritionist, to see how much weight loss that he lost in less than 6 months. He looked like a picture of health really a year ago. He weighed close to 200 pounds. He's 6 feet tall. Very handsome young man. And he lost 100 pounds in less than 6 months.
Half of his body weight.
Half of his body weight was totally just wasted away.
The first symptoms that will be experienced by a person with AIDS are things like tiredness, diarrhea, fever, severe weight loss, swelling in the lymph nodes. Those are the glands in your neck and your armpits and your groin. These kinds of things can also be symptoms of a number of other diseases. The next time that you get a fever, don't immediately think you've got AIDS. These symptoms in people with AIDS generally result in being much more prolonged, much more severe, much more painful. But if you get the symptoms, go to the doctor. Let him check it out.
What are some of the symptoms in the latter stages?
In the later stages, we find things like cancers and pneumonias and other infections that are very rare except in people with AIDS. But everybody that reaches this stage can be expected to die within the next 18 months to 2 years in most cases.
You may be asking yourself, does a teenager really need to know about AIDS?
Unfortunately, we also have, as teenagers, the idea that we'll never have anything happen to us because we're young, we're hardy, we're healthful, and so it can't happen to us. Everybody wants to experiment, particularly the teenage, and it certainly can be transmitted in the teenage as well as to young children. You know, when you have a very young newborn infant who has gotten AIDS from a mother who was an intravenous drug abuser, who shot that crack or heroin or whatever right into her veins, but put the AIDS virus in there, then that new baby has AIDS and will die very quickly. So there's not any AIDS that's immune.
Teenagers have a freer view of sex. They think it's okay to do it, with anybody or whatever, and it's going to get them in trouble.
In the United States today, the majority of all reported cases of sexually transmitted diseases are found in teens. And it's exactly the same things that will get you syphilis or gonorrhea will end up in your being infected with AIDS if your partner is infected with the AIDS virus.
Well, Dwayne, that brings up a serious question, the most serious question of the entire project here, of the video, and that is, how do you get AIDS?
I don't know if you can just get it from somebody by touching their hand, or when they sneeze. I heard you can get it when you sneeze, or using the bathroom.
Having sex, blood transfusions, drugs, like shooting it.
It's a blood-related disease, and you can only get it through blood transfusion, and usually, let's say if you use needles, shooting up with drugs, have sex without condoms, or anything that's related with the blood transfusion from one person to another, you can catch it.
Let's start by talking about some of the wrong answers about the ways that AIDS is transmitted. Sneezing, coughing, touching people, using the bathroom. These are ways that don't really increase your risk of getting AIDS. Your chances of getting AIDS from something like that are so small, they're not something to worry about. Blood transfusions are an answer we often hear, but the fact is that for years, all units of blood that are donated for transfusion have been tested, and if there's any indication at all that that blood has been infected with the AIDS virus, they don't use it, they throw it away. So blood transfusions are not something to be worried about.
Well, by donating blood and stuff.
That's one of the myths about AIDS that is based on absolutely no truth at all. The fact is that whenever you donate blood, the equipment that they use to take your donation is used once and thrown away. So there's absolutely no risk. The fact is that by donating blood, you have the opportunity to help save people's lives.
Then, Dwayne, where is the real danger?
The real danger is in the exchange of body fluids from one person to another.
That's one of those statements a lot of kids may not understand. What are body fluids?
Yeah, body fluids is a term that we keep hearing a lot, but it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you know what we're talking about. Well, blood is the most important one, but there are others.
When we're talking about the AIDS virus and bodily fluids, we're basically talking about semen, and we're talking about menstrual fluids, and we're talking about vaginal fluids. These are the fluids that we know carry the virus and can transmit the virus. The virus is found in other fluids. It's found in very, very small amounts in saliva. It's found in very, very small amounts in tears and in mucus out of the nose, for example, or the lungs. But the amounts of virus there are so small, and an individual's contact with those sort of secretions is such that transmission is unlikely. It is not easily transmitted by simply contact with blood or by simply contact with other body fluids. So just because someone has AIDS doesn't mean that they're out of it, that they can't help, they can't work, or they can't work with you. A person with AIDS has to have the opportunity to continue to work and continue to help and be part of our society, because they can do it. You shouldn't try to figure out who has the virus, because so long as you don't have sex with them, so long as you don't shoot up drugs with them, well, they're not going to hurt you. And you can't figure it out just because they're sick, because 80 or 90 or 95% of people who have the virus, they're not sick.
On the other hand, there are some things that you need to avoid if you don't want to get AIDS, and one of them you may not have heard much about.
The problem with any of the blood brother ceremonies, which some fraternities have, and I don't know if the sororities do it, but the fraternities do it, and then just friends that will try to establish a blood brother relationship puts you very much at risk for AIDS, because that's a direct transmission of blood products. That is the major way that AIDS gets spread, is just from blood contact.
The risk of catching that virus is very high when there is contact with semen, blood, or other sexual fluids. Any type of sexual contact can spread the virus, any type.
One sexual encounter is all it takes to get AIDS. It's the only thing that you have to have is an exposure to that AIDS virus. For a long time, everybody said, well, it's not the guys that are going to have problems with getting AIDS if they're having sex. Well, that's not true.
So both guys and girls need to listen. What can they do to avoid getting AIDS?
Safe sex, I guess.
I don't think there is such a thing as safe sex, because any sexual contact carries with it the risk of catching the virus. if the person you have sex with is infected with the virus.
You know, the only type of safe sex that anybody knows of right now at this time concerning AIDS is total abstinence and then having a monogamous marital relationship with no previous sexual relationships on either partner.
Well, safe sex, just using a condom stuff.
Is that safe?
Yeah, it's safe. You know, we're using a condom and being protected. That's pretty safe. Yeah.
We've all heard about condoms by now. They're advertised in the radio, television, newspapers, magazines, but Dwayne, are they really safe?
Condoms cannot prevent the transmission of AIDS. Condoms can reduce the likelihood of catching the virus, but they cannot remove completely the risk of being infected with the AIDS virus. Even a person who uses a condom may still become infected with the AIDS virus.
Condoms does not provide 100% protection, and anybody who believes so is a fool. We found that out years ago when we had people get pregnant using condoms.
Prevention of AIDS is not the same as prevention of pregnancy. Avoiding pregnancy is easy compared to avoiding infection with the AIDS virus.
Some have the idea that any kind of birth control will help to protect them against AIDS.
Yeah, I think it's safe. Yeah, or birth control pills, I guess.
The pill does not help at all in preventing infection with the AIDS virus.
The important thing that you need to keep aware of and keep in mind with use of condoms as far as AIDS is concerned is that once you get AIDS, that's 100%. And at this day and age, we don't have a treatment for AIDS. I mean, there's no cure.
That's really frightening, Dwayne. Yeah. Just how safe are condoms?
Well, as Dr. Claflin said a minute ago, we've known for years that condoms fail in protecting women against becoming pregnant. And we can expect that that failure rate is going to be even higher in preventing AIDS infection. There's at least two reasons for that, Dave. First, because the AIDS virus is so small. I don't know whether it's a little hard to picture, but the AIDS virus is 500 times smaller than human sperm. 500 times smaller. Second, while you could get infected with AIDS any day of the month, a woman's only fertile and able to become pregnant a few days out of each month.
It sounds to me like condoms are pretty risky.
Yes, they are. A doctor I know describes it this way. He says that having sex with somebody who could possibly be infected with AIDS is like playing Russian roulette. If you use a condom, it's like putting just one bullet in the chamber of the gun, pointing it at your head and pulling the trigger. If you don't use a condom, it's like using 4 or 5 bullets in the gun.
But Dwayne, most people say that teenagers are so sexually active that talking about waiting is absolutely ludicrous.
If you tell someone not to have sex, I don't think they're going to really listen, but encourage condoms is an excellent idea.
I hear that all the time, but interestingly enough, I hear it more from adults than I do from kids. The fact is that most teens are not sexually active. And the studies that appear to indicate otherwise really are pretty misleading.
Well, Dwayne, I speak to 300,000 students every year in public schools, and I can tell you that most of the kids I speak to are not stupid. These are kids that have the ability to make a sound decision and to choose, and especially when something so important as their very life is at stake.
Most high school kids don't shoot up drugs. Most high school kids don't have sex.
I speak to the high schools concerning things like pregnancy and virginity, and it's really interesting to see some of their responses.
Yeah, in fact, let's show them just a little bit of one of those high school assemblies and let the people watching see what you're talking about.
Virginity's not a dirty word. I'm going to tell you something, students. It may sound like a Victorian nerd standing here, but I don't give a rip what it sounds like. I honored that little girl I dated, And I respected her because I believe love demands respect, and you can't build a good relationship without respect. And we didn't build our relationship in the back seat of a car, man. We built it on the front seat of respect and trust and love. And I got news for you. We married because we wanted to. There weren't any abortions. There weren't any illegitimate children. I want to tell you what America really needs. You ready to hear this? America really needs one confirmed case of a pregnant teenage boy. Whoa!
We hear a lot about testing today. Are there pros and cons? What should we know about testing?
Well, there are a lot of tests, but the one that's most often used is one that looks for something in your blood that they call antibodies to the AIDS virus. Now, these are things that your blood system develops to fight off infection, and your body will develop specific, identifiable antibodies for any specific disease. So they've developed this test that looks for that antibody that's designed to fight AIDS. Now, for some reason, this antibody doesn't work in protecting the body against AIDS, but it is something that we can identify with a test.
Then the next question is, who should be tested?
If you have been exposed to the AIDS virus, either through IV drug use or sex with someone who's an IV drug user or homosexual contact, the best place to go would be your personal physician. If you can't do that, or if you choose not to, the second best place is the Department of Public Health. And if that, for one reason or another, you don't choose to do, the best place to go for testing would be a physician who is very familiar with the treatment of AIDS and the diagnosis of infection with the AIDS virus.
If a person is infected, will the test always show it?
The AIDS test will show that the person's infected with the virus, anywhere from 1 to 6 months after the infection occurs. And it's a good test. It's not 100%. There are patients who have AIDS, there are patients who die with AIDS, in whom the test is negative. But it is basically a good test, and it is used very widely. We all use it to help.
As good and as helpful as the test is, it's not perfect. In fact, recent studies are showing that it can take as long as 14 months from the time a person is infected to the time that the test shows that infection. And in all of that time, that infected person is able to transfer the disease to other people. That's the real danger.
So there's no question that people can transmit the virus prior to developing a positive test.
If there's no cure for AIDS, why bother to be tested for AIDS?
If I was to have a blood test, I really wouldn't want people to tell me that I did have it. I might as well just die on my own instead of going through all the stages of knowing that I do have it.
It's really important to know whether you're infected with AIDS or not, and it's also important that you let your doctor know.
So if you've got a positive test, stay in touch with a physician who you trust and in whom you have confidence, and that is very important to do. It appears that people who are infected are more likely to become ill if they continue to abuse their bodies in some fashion. For example, IV drug users who use a large amount of IV drugs are much more likely to become ill and die than are people who simply had a single infusion of the virus, say someone who got in a blood transfusion. Gay men who have continued to have many sexual partners, dozens or hundreds of sexual partners a year, are more likely to become ill more quickly than gay men who have a small number of sexual partners. Certain activities increase the risk of becoming ill. IV drug use and promiscuity, contact with lots of different people sexually. Both of these things will increase the risk of becoming ill and of dying.
In other words, if you test positive, there are things you can do to make your chances better. If you test negative, then you have the relief of knowing that you're not infected, and you can take steps to make sure that AIDS doesn't catch you.
Again, the good news is you don't have to get caught with AIDS. You can avoid drug abuse, especially intravenous drug abuse, all drug abuse, and avoid sexual activity prior to marriage. I believe waiting can be worth it.
Yeah, Dave, even in this era of AIDS, life can be great.
Do we have all the answers about AIDS yet, or are there still things being learned about it?
We are learning new things about this virus and the disease that it causes every year, every month. We're learning more about how to treat it and how to help people all the time. We're learning more and more about how to prevent it every year.
So stay current, stay healthy, and whatever you do, don't let AIDS catch you.
What I know about AIDS, I don't know, they kill people.
Huh?
AIDS, they kill people.
It's pretty scary, I guess.
AIDS, it's scary, I'm afraid of it, and it should be stopped.
I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I'm too young. Because I don't want to die.
Because I don't want to die.
I know that I wouldn't want to die being a teenager because I have a lot to live for, and I think other teens do too.